Hi, so today I wanted to go through something called SCP or PSCP in Windows. So this is really cool and I'll show you why. So if I get rid of that and I go here, so say for example you want to copy the SSH keys that you created through SSH keygen, so you did your SSH dash keygen, you can say dash T, which means type RSA B4096 for example, which means bits of 4096. I've actually coded it a slightly different way, but you can say, for example, something similar to that. You can say dash "n", which means no comment, and you put it as empty, and that will run, more or less. You couldn't even say dash "f", actually. Dash "b" is iffy, but dash "f", then you could say, for example, which means file name, you can say id underscore RSA, for example, and that will create it within the current directory. So say, for example, you've done something like that, and you've got your keys out, which I have here, and you want to copy it over to Windows, but you don't want to show the user the key. What you can do is that you can actually use something called PSCP to do that, which is basically just secure P, I think it's what it's called. So I've been reading into it, and it's really cool. What you can do is you can actually specify the directory of the Linux machine to the Windows one, and just specify the password. So in my case, I'm building my DNS server, which is one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment. So I built a script for it in my GitHub repo to do that, and it's got some failsafes built in. So, and in fact I can show it to you. I think why not? I think it's not really that much of a classification, it's just really pointing IP addresses, so yeah, I'm okay with showing this. So let me just go into my GitLab repo. Okay, so in my GitLab repo, which you can see here, I want to just show a command for a second, so I put that there. In my GitLab repo, if I go to bind administrators, you can see that I've made about 29 commits to this already, so I'm just going to go to file and show you the original file itself. So unfortunately I can't really clone this for whatever reason, it's just weird, but in here, right, you can see all the script functions and everything. So my rev zone, kind of the interfacing that goes on through the script, so moving the interfaces back and forth through the function networking status check. For example, appending to sed, all that good stuff. H keys through, like I mentioned before, to SSH localhost, which is a trick that you can use to make a directory on Linux. I've used true in this case. The reason why I've used true is to exit the subshell, because if you SSH locally, so you do a local SSH host, what happens is that it creates another shell, and it waits for you to terminate that shell session before you can actually rerun the script. So so what I mean is that it will do, for example, the network check, and create the IP address automatically, and insert the IPv6 information. So auto basically means that it will do the auto configuration. So in IPv6 you have something called an auto, I think it's an autoconf in IPv6, because it's just massive. The the IP address space that you're working with is 128 bits. So when you're working with that much address space, you don't really want to be kind of subnetting it, because it's like huge anyway. So why would you want it? Why would you want to? So yeah, so in this case then I'm calling the function back up, which is called network status check, which is up here. So that function runs, and this is just essentially graphing for active and failed interfaces. So for example, if it's active, it will just carry on. It will carry on to the next step in the if function, in the if statement, sorry. And as you can see, I'm using the old way of passing functions, so I really shouldn't pass functions this way. It should be this way. This is the new way of passing it through, which is the quotes here. So you can pass the function in that way and just say this is the function. So nothing really special going on here. It's just kind of using sed to substitute the IP addresses that way, and then this is the old way that I used to do it, which is through an accept script. So this is like, for example, if you're expecting some information to come out of the screen. So in this case, when we spawn the process, the keygen, you can just literally throw it out of the passphrase. But I've kind of put that down to 3 lines of code through this, which is just much more efficient. What else? So yeah, just again, uncommenting the line of authorized keys so that I can get in. Nothing really here. and then just checking the reverse and forward lookup zones, and all that good stuff really. So starting bind, checking the configuration through check zone. So this is just checking that the zone can be loaded for the serial number, so the serial number can be loaded in. That means that the file is technically working, but for example, if I run this command variable, I don't want that one, but I want the checked F1, check zone, that's it, check conf. And if I run this, for example, on my DNS server, it fails for some reason. So I'm looking into that at the moment. So if I go back to this is what we were talking about. So at the moment, what it's doing is just that it's logging into my machine, which is called not GitLab, that's my GitLab machine. Oh. Well, anyway, this is the article that I found the information from, which is pretty good. But if I go back here, where did I put it? Oh, yeah, yeah, so in here, if I go to VJ Cloud, for example, I'm not going to show the keys on this stream because that's just silly. But if I go IP address show, so from here, you can see that my interface on here is virtualized and it's 253 on a /8 subnet. So it just means that 255 bits are on in this IP. And my broadcast address is 10.255.255.255 because all 3 octets are off. There's only 1 octet which is on, which is the first bit. So from here you can see that that's my IP address. So what I've done is that this particular user, which is DC, has the IP address here, and what you can see is that you've got home DC -SSH IDRSA, so it's copying that file and it's putting it onto my desktop. So if I was to, so we're in C users Danny, so I think if I go back up and I do an ls, yeah, I can see DC, CD, DC, and if I do an ls here, you can see which is here, so desktop, and if I ls, you can see my IDRSA files in there. I should be seeing a lot more files than that, but it's in there for whatever reason. So I mean, I should be able to see it on my desktop. So let's have a look at this. Okay, desktop, and should be a file called IDRSA. Let's have a look. Yeah, see, there you go, IDRSA. So that's come from the, oh, that's Linux scripts. That's not the one that we're looking for. That's not the one that we're looking for. C users Danny. Ah, it's looking for, oh, okay. So I've actually put it in the wrong place. No problem, we can go back and rerun the command. So it's saying home DC, so we want C users, and we want Danny desktop. Danny desktop. So now if I run that, that's before my password. Put that in, and as you can see, straight away, it's there. So now I've got my private key, which is on my desktop. So it's really good because that means I don't need to use the cat function in, the cat command even in Linux to say that, to cat out the file and basically say this is what it is. So you don't have to go to the PuTTYGen stuff, because I should be able to just use the PuTTYGen to get in there. Of course, it's be silly of me to really show that on screen, so I'm not going to show it on screen. So yeah, that's all that this was about really. It's just showing different ways that you can sort of script and do things with the power of both PowerShell and Linux. Okay, cool. I hope you enjoyed this session, and hope to see you again soon. But before I actually go, maybe it's worth mentioning what the DNS server is doing in this case. So this is BindDNS, which is a project which I've been working on. So BindDNS is like think of it as your phone. And you know on your phone you have numbers and you have names, right, in your phone? Now, say for example you wanted to contact a particular person and you only had the number. Now, if you only had the number, that's not necessarily useful if you did a lookup. So if I was to basically do a lookup on just numbers, so say for example, let's have, for example, 0208, you know, 111111, for example, something, you know, something like that. Then the problem that you have, or you know, 0192, for example. So if you did 0192 as an area code, and you said 0192534, whatever, you know, you saw all these numbers. Now the problem with that is that you don't remember what the numbers are in correlation to what the name is. So you wouldn't know, for example, what 192.168.1.1 would be in relation to what 10.0.0.89 would be, for example. These are just numbers. Now if I associate this with the numbers, so for example this is routerlogin.net, which is what Netgear uses, right? Then you'd know, for example, this is to log into your router, right? Now, if I did the same with 10.0.0.89, so say for example we had a network whereby we had the routing tables loaded in for the -10 network, then you can associate this IP address with, for example, this is my, I don't know, for example, GitLab machine, right? You know GitLab now, so not a problem. So now I can say GitLab in my browser to go to GitLab, right? So you could have something like that, for example, if you wanted to. But more specifically, you'd have something like github.local, which would be for local. So you just say that this is your top-level domain, and this is your subdomain, right? So if I typed in github.local, it would resolve to this, right? So that's the whole idea behind Bind, is that you can do things like that to essentially make your life a bit easier than running, for example, 10.0.0.20, which is my GitLab machine. So rather than doing that, it's just saying, well, I can use I can cat the resolve.conf file to say that this is my name server, and I want my name server to have all these zones looked into it. So if you go back to my zones in here, so we create the zone here, which is saying, sorry, this is my forwarder, but if I go down to my zones, for example, VJ local is one of my zones for my master. But if you go back to the zone itself, which has all the A records, you can see from here that it's just doing a single lookup to go to the gateway, to DNS, to the Nextcloud, Jenkins, Ansible, my computer, and GitLab, right? So it's using this as a method to essentially resolve the addresses from the resolve.conf file to say, well, we can go to these particular addresses as a resolution to the IP address. So in this case, if I was to type dns.vj.local, I would expect to go to the DNS server, which is the one which I'm running the script on. So that's what I mean by bind. Okay, so that's a little project that I've been working on, and I hope to see you again soon.